So welcome to the 2024 NFL Mock Draft 1.0. As of the day we're recording, I'm not sure when this will come out. Right now it's April 14th. It might come out the next day, the 15th. So we are about 10, 11 days away from the actual draft on April 25th. I'm going to try and make at least two more after these before that night comes. A few days from now I might do 2.0, and then maybe the day before or the day of the NFL draft I might put out my third one. But want to get my first one out of the way a little bit later than I expected, but just kind of busy with other things. So without further ado, let's get into the first 1.0 of the 2024 NFL Mock Draft. So starting with the Chicago Bears, should be no surprise here, we have Caleb Williams. By far the best prospect, best quarterback prospect in this draft class, and head and shoulders the undisputed first overall pick. Even going back to at the end of his Oklahoma year, there was some people thought he was going to go first overall, and then after his first year at USC, halfway through, or whatever you want to say, at some point, people knew that he was going to be the undisputed first overall pick when he decided to come out. Even though he had a down year this season compared to his first year at USC, I still think he's a phenomenal quarterback. I don't think it's all his fault for the regression in the USC team. We look at their first year when they were basically one game away from making the playoffs, and this past season really just fell apart. I think it's more so the defensive side, and Caleb did struggle at times, but I don't think that should deter the Bears from selecting him. I think he's a phenomenal quarterback. I'm not going to go as far as say generational or compared to Patrick Mahomes. I'm not going to do that, but I think he's going to be a great quarterback. You look at the talent they have around him with DJ Moore, newly acquired Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, and also newly signed DeAndre Swift. I think this is an amazing offense for a rookie, and for him. You look at the Chicago Bears, where they've yet to have a, I think it was if I read it right, yet to have a 4,000 yard passer. If I had that right, in their franchise history, and no doubt I can see Caleb Williams easily breaking that. Maybe, I don't know if it would be in his rookie year, but definitely in his second year. But I think this is a phenomenal pick right here in the quarterback they're getting. So next we're moving to the Washington Commanders. I'm going to go with Jayden Daniels for this one. I have seen that say Drake May, and in terms of people's draft boards overall, people do have Drake May above Jayden Daniels, but I think there's a much higher ceiling with Jayden Daniels as opposed to Drake May. When you look at the skill set, look at his Heisman season this past year of what he was able to do, and you compare it to Joe Burrow when he won his Heisman year, he had better stats. The reason we don't talk about it too much, you don't hear about it a lot, is because of just the team success with Joe Burrow going undefeated and winning the championship, as opposed to Jayden Daniels, who at one point they were a high-ranked team, but at the end they were, middle of the pack. I can't remember where they ended exactly in the top 25, if they even were in the top 25 at the end of it, and they got a decent bowl game. So that's why it doesn't get talked about too much. But you look at the stats, he had a phenomenal season, had over 1,000 yards rushing, had over 3,000 yards passing. I think he had 50 plus touchdowns and total touchdowns. A little bit concerned with some of the highlights we've seen before, where he takes big hits in the collegiate level. It's you definitely cannot do the same thing in the NFL level. But he'll no doubt, in my opinion, clean that up. But I think overall skill set wise, definitely rivals Caleb Williams, and maybe does some things better than Caleb can do. But overall, I think the Washington Commanders, I think this is the best selection available with their remaining quarterbacks. I do believe Jayden Daniels is the second best quarterback in the draft class. Again, you could make an argument for Drake May, but for me, I have Jayden Daniels going second overall. So next we have the New England Patriots. And once again, trying to find the franchise quarterback after Mac Jones' era failed. Not entirely his fault, but also not the great quarterback to begin with. And for this one, no doubt, we are going to stick with quarterback. And I'm going to go with Drake May. You look at the build, 6'4", great arm, decent, good enough mobility to make plays. I don't want to kind of sell out and always just say it's next Josh Allen. He could be similar to Josh Allen or Justin Herbert, but definitely has the capability of being that type of quarterback for the New England Patriots. And you look at the division that they're in with Josh Allen, Tua, and Aaron Rodgers. It's definitely the New England Patriots as of right now are far behind for their quarterback situation. Drake May has potential to rival that in a few years if they surround him with enough talent, with the right pieces around him as he progresses, and hopefully he does progress into the quarterback that they expect to. So far, North Carolina hasn't had the best track record with quarterbacks. I know Sam Howell did have a solid season last year in his first year with playing with the Commanders, now with the Seattle Seahawks. If you look at the previous pick, before that with another high North Carolina quarterback in Mitch Trubisky, it's a little left to be desired. Even with Sam Howell having a solid season, still a lot left to be desired. But Drake May has more enough the physical tools to become a great quarterback. Now we'll see how Jerod Mayo, being the new head coach taking over from Bill Belichick, how he decides to build the offense. And I think hopefully it doesn't take the same aspect of going out there and just getting average wide receivers. Actually, he needs to actually go out there and get elite pieces like the Bills have done, like the Miami has done, like the Jets have done. They have to keep that going with Drake May. So this one, of course, you've already seen the first trade up for my mock draft at least, and I have the Minnesota Vikings, which a lot of people do have, going up to 4th overall. With them having 2 first-round picks, it makes complete sense why they would. And for this, the obvious reason we are going 4 quarterbacks in a row, I have J.J. McCarthy going 4th overall to the Minnesota Vikings. The last best quarterback available on the board. I do go back and forth of whether the Patriots will draft, would select McCarthy. So in this situation, you kind of can flip-flop this where May falls to the Vikings at 4 and McCarthy goes to the Patriots at 3. But for this one, I'm going to stick with McCarthy going 4th overall to the Minnesota Vikings, trading up for this one. Not the biggest fan of J.J. McCarthy, but yeah, definitely has the skill set. Made plays when he had to. I wasn't too impressed with the championship run. Again, once again, he made the play. He did what he was asked to do. But I think overall, it was more of a benefit of an amazing run game and amazing defense. We'll see what he does with the Vikings, but in terms of weapon wise, he is going to a phenomenal place with J.J. McCarthy. We'll see what they do, or Justin Jefferson. Sorry. We'll see what happens with Justin Jefferson in the future with his contract, but at least for looking just for this rookie year, has the best wide receiver in the NFL. Has a phenomenal wide receiver too in Jordan Addison, who had 10 touchdowns in his rookie season. You look at T.J. Hawkinson, one of the best tight ends in the NFL. The only thing that is a little bit lacking is the running back position. We'll see if they figure that out later in the draft process. But at least right now, we look at for the skill set for the wide receivers and tight ends, a phenomenal spot for J.J. McCarthy to thrive. And you look at another thing too, a revamped division with the Packers having struggled once again on a quarterback with Jordan Love. The Chicago Bears, of course, selecting Caleb Williams, so you are going to have that rivalry already. The first overall pick in the draft, and also the Detroit Lions, who were basically one good second half away from making it to the Super Bowl. I mean, they definitely had the 49ers on at the brink in the NFC Championship game. So this is going to be a competitive division. It's going to be tough for J.J. McCarthy, but again, with the tools, with the skill set that he has around him, I think it is possible for him to succeed there. So next we have is the Los Angeles Chargers. And for this one, once again, this is kind of an obvious pick when you look at where the draft board's going. I have Marvin Harrison Jr., definitely one of the best wide receiver prospects we've seen in a while. He does everything well. He checks all the boxes. You look at the physical side. He has the size. He has the hands. He has the speed, the route running, and so forth. The yards after catch. He checks all the boxes. Does everything great, and this is something that Justin Herbert needs. With Keenan Allen and Mike Williams being gone, you have to have someone there to replace them. It's very it's very tough to trust this team if they didn't go with wide receiver at this spot and they go in with Quentin Johnson and Palmer. There has to be more for that, and I think Marvin Harrison is a no-brainer pick, an undisputed pick right here for the Los Angeles Chargers. So next we have is the New York Giants. Another no-brainer for this one is Malik Nabers. To me, this is kind of the obvious pick. Once again, if you look at Brian Daboll, they have to get pieces around Daniel Jones if they decide to keep him. This is another prime team that could potentially move up a couple spots to try and select J.J. McCarthy or Drake May, whoever may fall to the 4th overall pick spot. But they've been lacking a great wide receiver since Odell Beckham, and that's been 2017, 2018, so it's been a while. And you look at Brian Daboll, where his job is potentially on the line. You have to have playmakers like you did in Buffalo. They start slowly building that and getting back to how your team was in 2022 when they surprised everyone and went to the playoffs and beat the Vikings in the wild card game. I think you need to do that. To me, it's another obvious choice in this one. And Malik Nabers, he's a phenomenal wide receiver. Some people even have him as the number one wide receiver in this draft class. I don't, but a lot of people do kind of go back and forth on that. But there's no question that Malik Nabers is a phenomenal wide receiver alongside Marvin Harrison Jr. It's an obvious pick right here. So next is we have the Tennessee Titans, and for this, I'm going to go with offensive line, with the best offensive lineman in the draft. I'm going to go with Joe Alt. Wide receiver, they are good. You could go Rome Odunze in this spot, but I think you have DeAndre Hopkins for one more year. You just signed Kevin Ridley to a 4-year, $94 million deal. You just also signed Tony Pollard, and also too, the wide receiver class is pretty deep, so you can go in maybe day 2 and get a good wide receiver. Not saying they're going to be Rome Odunze, but you can get a solid wide receiver in day 2, and potentially maybe in day 3 if they decide to do that. But getting the best offensive line to help Will Levis progress, I think, is the most important spot here. So next we have the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm going to go with edge rusher here. I'm going to go with Dallas Turner. Offense, they're completely set, and they're definitely their big splash was getting their if you want to say franchise quarterback in Kirk Cousins. I think defense is the way to go. Dallas Turner, one of the best edge rushers in this draft. I think it makes sense to try and build that defensive side. They have played well at times, but it can do better. But no doubt with his help, this team can certainly make the playoffs with what they have, or what they've done in the offseason and what the pieces they have already. So for the Chicago Bears, this is definitely an interesting spot where they can go in this one. I know you already have DJ Moore. I know you already have Keenan Allen. But why not go for another wide receiver for this one? Why not go Rome Odunze to pair him up with Caleb Williams? You don't know how much you have left in Keenan Allen. At times he has been banged up. This past season was kind of an outlier. Definitely surprised that he was able to stay healthy, and thankfully so. He was able to. He played phenomenal. But I think you have to look to the future, and Rome Odunze, once again, I think it'd be a great pairing alongside DJ Moore. If a long-term solution, has a size 6'3", phenomenal speed, great hands, great route running, could be a deep threat alongside DJ Moore. And once again, can benefit, can certainly help out Caleb Williams in this spot right there. I think this is definitely an absolute best case scenario for the Chicago Bears at 1-9 if this does happen. Obviously, we know what the first overall pick what's going to be. It just more plays out on what's going to happen with the 9th overall pick spot. Could they go defense? They could, but I think when you have someone like Rome Odunze fall to 9, and you kind of see the writing on the wall for Keenan Allen, maybe he can give you one or two good years. We'll see what happens with him, but I think you have to look to the future of Rome Odunze and take the chance on him and load up on that off the wide receiver position. So next we have the New York Jets, and the obvious pick is offensive line with Aaron Rodgers coming back from Achilles injury, and you look at how the other quarterbacks fared after he was down with Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian, and I think they had like 2 more quarterbacks. I can't remember what their names are, to be honest, but none of them played well. And certainly it comes down to they're just not good quarterbacks. The other part is just the offensive line was horrible. So it looks like the obvious option should be offensive line, but I think they're going to pass on this one. I think they're going to kind of not shock a lot of people, but maybe go in a direction that people aren't expecting too much. I'm going to go with Brock Bowers here with the 10th overall pick to New York Jets. Definitely head and shoulders the best tight end in this draft, and certainly can be one of the best tight ends in the NFL in the right situation. He's going to a place where you have Aaron Rodgers to start with. You have Wilson at wide receiver, newly signed Mike Williams. You still have Allen Lazard there, Breece Hall. So you definitely have a great offensive weapons around Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets that can really benefit this team alongside what they've already done with trading for Hassan Reddick. On paper, this team can definitely there's no excuse whatsoever why this team can't win the division in the AFC East. They have by far the best pieces. You've seen kind of pieces being shuffled around for the other teams, with the Bills losing big name players, especially the biggest one being Stephon Diggs. You look at the Miami Dolphins and what they've lost on the defensive side of the ball, and you look at the New England Patriots that are in a rebuild. So it just seems like it's for the taking. But I do think it's be a challenging division this year. But there's no question on paper that they should be the favorites. They have the team, they have the roster. I think it makes complete sense, especially when you add Brock Bowers in this mix. It's going to make it difficult, not just for the division, but for any team to really match up on that defensive side and really match up with the playmakers they have on that one. So next with the Arizona Cardinals moving down to 11 in place where the Minnesota Vikings were. I do have going with defense with Gannon. His MO, obviously, of course, is the defense. And you saw what he did in Philadelphia's final year, having a historic defense, especially with the defensive line. Of course, we're not talking about defensive line with this one. We're talking about cornerback and Quinton Mitchell. I think any defensive help is needed. The obvious, a big spot would be wide receiver for what they've lost, and getting rid of Rondale Moore, losing Marquise Brown. So the wide receiver position is definitely a big void for Kyler Murray. Not really any playmakers left on that side, but just knowing how, once again, just what he knows best. I think building that defense is big. And you look at last year; they were pretty competitive in a spot where it looked like there's a decent chance that they were gonna be the first overall pick. Now they weren't too far off of that, being fourth overall, but they were competitive in a good amount of games. So I think this just adds to it and tries to recreate the defense he had in Philadelphia. Now for the Denver Broncos. This is it's a tricky situation for this one because there's a ton of spots where they can go, and for this one, I might be going a little too crazy with this pick, and definitely gonna be a little some comments on this and people saying how horrible this selection this is, or in my opinion at least. It's going to be Michael Penix Jr. Probably way too high for him to go, but the team is desperate. They have Jared Stidham and Ben DiNucci as our two quarterbacks on the roster. You cannot go in the NFL season with those two. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. And I think they are in a desperate situation with them letting go Russell Wilson. Maybe it was a surprise to everyone because of the dead cap situation, but they moved off of him. I think you have to get someone in there. A couple concerns is obviously the age with him being, I think if he's 20, I'm not sure if he's 24. If not, he's gonna be 24 pretty soon. So an old rookie at 24 years old, and also too the reason why he was in college for so long is just the injury list. So it's those two are definitely worrisome with, of course, the lifespan of his NFL career and also, too, with the injury concerns. But I think overall they're in a tough spot where they're desperate, and I think that you select a quarterback and Michael Penix. Not bashing him. I do think I like him as a prospect, as a quarterback, but probably a little bit too high than people maybe want him to go or expect him to go. But I'm not surprised. It's just the typical we see every year. Court teams are just desperate for the position because it's tough to hit on that. So next we have the Las Vegas Raiders. And for this one, we are going to go with Teron Arnold. Happy Antonio Pierce got the full-time position at the head coaching job. I thought he did a phenomenal job as the interim. Definitely his biggest game was the beating Kansas City Arrowhead in Christmas. And I think he wants to build that defensive side as well. You could go offense maybe in this spot. Quarterback wise, not the best, but definitely have Gardner Minshew, which is a solid quarterback, by far better than what the situation is with Ben DiNucci and Jared Stidham in Denver. But no doubt, I think that long-term wise, they have to look somewhere else, and it could be maybe in day two, or depending on where Bo Nix falls, that could be a spot where they might move up, or he might fall to them. But at least for right now, I have him going defense with this one. Another spot can also be wide receiver with Devontae Adams just getting up there in age. You look at what else they have. Let's see. I'm kind of looking at their roster now. You have Jacoby Myers, and outside that, nothing too flashy besides that. So wide receiver could be a spot at this one, and running backs out of the question because running back there's no worthy running back for round one. But for this one, I'm going to turn to defense and help and Antonio Pierce build that defensive side of the ball with a great selection in Teron Arnold. So the Saints, I have the New Orleans Saints, and speaking of just being in a tough situation, especially with the cap wise, it's been rough for them for the last few years. But I'm gonna go with Fashanu from Penn State to try and get their next Terrence Armstead they lost a few seasons ago. Many places many directions they can go in this one. Many spots. Wide receiver can be no doubt a obvious choice right here, given them losing Michael Thomas. Not that they've really missed, it's a huge loss because of his injury list last few seasons of him being in and out of the lineup consistently. And also, too, with Alvin Kamara getting up there in age, we just don't know what's going to happen with him in his future very soon. Last couple seasons, he has been speculated being on the trade deadline or up for trade for teams. But for this one, I think offensive line to help Derek Carr is key. So next we have is the Indianapolis Colts. And this is where the next wide receiver goes off. I have Brian Thomas Jr. going to the Indianapolis Colts. I do, even though they have, I like the wide receiver in Josh Downs from North Carolina last year. I think he was a solid rookie for the Colts. I think you have to keep up with the conference, especially the very tough division that they're in now with C.J. Stroud having a big three in wide receivers of Tank Dell, Nico Collins, newly acquired Stephon Diggs. You look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they did collapse in the second half of the season. They're still a good team, and they still will be a contender for that division. And you look at the Tennessee Titans as well, with DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard with Will Levis. I think for this one, you keep up and you get a phenomenal wide receiver in this one, 6'4", great speed, has a size, a deep threat for Anthony Richardson to pair him up with Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce, and also too at the fourth wide receiver with Josh Allen. So I think it's a great selection here for the Indianapolis Colts. So next we have is the Seattle Seahawks, and once again we're going to go with Fuege, if I said his last name right, from Oregon State, to help just build the offensive line. The clear spot could be defensive line, that secondary, because they have lost pieces this past offseason. But I'm going to stick with offensive line for this one to help Geno Smith out on that side of the ball. Next we have is the Jacksonville Jaguars, and for this selection I do have Jared Verse, another next edge rusher off the board. Offense, they are good with that. Offensive line is probably the weaker spot on that side of the ball, but I think they can manage with that. I think defense is trying to load up on that side of the ball and help out. Of course, they just signed Josh Allen to a long-term deal, 5-year deal. I think you should pair him up with another great edge rusher in Jared Verse, one of the best edge rushers in the draft. And I think that it's a great combination on that side of the ball to help rebuild that a little bit more. Biggest splash they had, or say one of the biggest splashes they had, was signing Gabe Davis, which I think they overpaid for him, but it's another weapon for Trevor Lawrence, and it's a receiver to replace Calvin Ridley. You get a younger option at wide receiver in that spot, and maybe, I don't know how it averages out for the contracts per year, but maybe a little bit cheaper than Calvin Ridley, what he signed for. But I'm gonna stick with defense on this side with Jared Verse. Once again, to pair him up with Josh Allen and help that defensive side, to help the defensive line. So next we have is the Cincinnati Bengals. Once again, we have another offensive lineman coming out off the board in Troy Fuente Anu. Doing pretty horrible with pronouncing these names, but the offensive lineman from Washington. The biggest key is just to protect Joe Burrow. This is his second season-ending injury that he's had in his short career, going back to his rookie year with the ACL, and also with the hand injury late in the season. And also, too, not even to add up with that, but just the small minor injuries he's had throughout his career. And looking at the beginning of this past season, he had the calf injury, and finally started to show progress and get back to the old form. And then the hand injury, the finger, kept him out for the rest of the year and really derailed the chances for the Cincinnati Bengals to make the playoffs in that one. Jake Browning did a solid job stepping in, but definitely a big drop-off and a huge loss for the Cincinnati Bengals for Joe Burrow. And you don't want to have a situation a few years from now of having another Andrew Luck where he has a short career because they just can't protect him. He's getting hit a lot. You have to do whatever it takes to figure that offensive line out. And I think for this one, this is a great selection to help Joe Burrow out. So we have the Los Angeles Rams up next, and I think for this one, the the blatant choice is going defensive line for this one. I have Laiatu from UCLA. You have to build that defense. I think it's not even just a defensive line, but the defense regardless. They've lost many big names on that side of the ball the last 3 years, and with the biggest loss being future Hall of Famer Aaron Donald retiring, it is a huge void to fill. It's definitely a huge spot you have to replace. I think starting somewhere on that defensive line is key. Offense, you're good enough, you can get by for another year. And once again, if they have to go on offense, they can go in day 2. But I think getting a pass rusher in round 1 and again day 2 from UCLA, once again is up there as one of the best pass rushers in the draft, along with Turner and Verse. I think it's you have to do whatever it takes to build that and try and slowly fill that hole that with Aaron Donald now being gone from the team. So next is we have the Pittsburgh Steelers in this one, and I have another receiver coming off the board. I have Donnie Mitchell. I think with them losing or trading away, I should say, Johnson and going to the Carolina Panthers. I think that they have to get there and get another good wide receiver to pair up with George Pickens. I think it's obvious. I think for this one, a little bit of raw of a talent, but that has everything there. He has a size, 6'4", great speed. It's got a little bit of raw of a talent, and I think he's someone that's going to have to develop. It's maybe take a year or two, but no doubt I think it can be a great pairing for Russell Wilson and also future-wise Justin Fields if he becomes the starter. We don't know what's going to happen with that situation, but again, I think just getting weapons for Russell Wilson is key. I think it's the biggest thing, and moving off of Deontay Johnson, who is a solid wide receiver, I think this one you definitely upgrade in Antonio Mitchell, or sorry, Donnie Mitchell. I apologize, Donnie Mitchell, which is a much bigger wide receiver and a bigger, a better player for contested passes and 50-50 balls in that spot. So definitely, wide receiver is a good spot, good selection here for the Steelers. So next we have the Miami Dolphins. This one, it's another no surprise, at least to me. I'm going to go with offensive line in this one. I'm going to go with J.C. Latham. J.C. Latham from Alabama. A big weak spot for the offense was the offensive line. And you have to be, same thing what I said about Joe Burrow, you have to be worried about Tua with his injury history as well in the NFL. You look at last year with the, if you want to be technical, the quote-unquote 3 concussions that he suffered in one season, it definitely is a huge risk. Definitely something you should be worried about. Some people even talked about he should have retired after that last season. He didn't. He comes back, and a little bit late down the stretch, he was hurt. I think he had a shoulder injury towards the end of the season, but overall did much better with staying healthy. But you have to protect him. I know that, and especially the worst thing too is he's up for a contract pretty soon. I believe after this year he's up for a contract. So I think you have to do whatever it takes to protect him. I know there's been rumblings about maybe wide receiver. They would go maybe Xavier Worthy to pair him up with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and that's fun and all. Offensive line is the biggest need for him. Tua is not a big quarterback, and if we go back to how it was in 2022, where he's taking hits, and you give him that the long-term deal, it's gonna be horrible. It's gonna wreck the Dolphins, and I think the biggest thing you have to do is protect him. So next is we have the Philadelphia Eagles, and sticking with offensive line, why not go out there and get Jason Kelce's replacement with Jackson Powers-Johnson? It makes complete sense. It's there to help Justin Hurts, and especially the tush push. A big reason why it was so successful is you've had arguably one of the best centers, if not the best center in NFL history, and it's a massive loss for the Eagles offense and the offensive line. So go out there and you immediately place him for a long-term option for Jackson Powers-Johnson, who's going to be there for the long run, and he can, obviously not a plug and play, but it can definitely go in, and you can still have that success. Not guaranteeing it's going to, the tush push and other aspects of the offense is going to be just as smoothly as Jason Kelce was there, but it's no doubt it already solves the long-term option at that center. You don't have to worry about who's going to be at the position, who you're going to have to maybe slide over to play center. you get him right here in Jackson Powers Johnson. So next we have the Arizona Cardinals. Pick up at 23. This is their second pick in the NFL draft. They have one more coming up pretty soon. You see it at 27. What do they go here? And for this one, I do have Byron Murphy on the defensive side of the ball. Once again, stacking up on that defense. I pair him up with, we have Quincy Mitchell. If I'm saying this right, where is he? Here he is, Quinton Mitchell. My apologies, Quinton Mitchell. And the 11th overall pick, you get a nice run stuffer, nose tackle, and in the middle of the defensive line, and Byron Murphy Jr. or Byron Murphy II. Of course, one concern is not too long ago he had the DUI, which could he fall to the first round because of that is a possibility. I think he will slide in the first round. I think before the DUI, maybe he can go a little bit higher than 23, but I think there's a great value for the Arizona Cardinals at this spot here. And also, depending on in a few picks later at 27, we'll see what happens at 27. What I have them going with. So, definitely so far, I think they've done a great job with the first round picks that I have selected for them. I think it's a phenomenal situation for the Arizona Cardinals. So next is we have the Chicago Bears at 24. Once again, speaking about offensive line for not too long ago, I think you have to get Tyron Smith's replacement, who they just let go after many years. Was it maybe 2011, 2012 whenever he came in. It's felt like forever, and no doubt a future Hall of Famer in him. You immediately go out there and replace him with Marius Mims, big offensive lineman, 6'8". What I said for Jason Kelce, not saying he's going to step right in and he's going to be fantastic, but I think we'll definitely patch that side of the ball and help Dak Prescott and that offense out, and definitely just keep things going the way it's been. One thing you don't have to worry about is just injury. Tyron Smith has been banged up the last few seasons. It has been in and out of the lineup. But this one, you get a younger option at that side of the ball, so it kind of puts your mind at ease at that spot. So next we have at 25, I have once again the Green Bay Packers continuing the trend and the tradition of taking defense in the first round. I have Cooper DeJean, if I said his last name right, versatile corner, can play cornerback obviously and safety as well, so he can fill different needs when need to, and you can maybe use him as a gadget player on the defensive side of the ball, always playing maybe not, I don't want to say positionless player, but can be that at times. You can move around on that side, on that field, wherever he needs to be. I think it's a great selection there. And once again, just continuing the spot of tradition of taking defense in the first round, but I don't think you should be too upset with the selection for the Green Bay Packers. I think it's a great, phenomenal pick from this one. Once again, very versatile on that side of the ball. So next we have is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And a little bit of a project for this one. The stats really don't jump out at you, but the physical tools and his athleticism definitely does, is Chop Robinson from Penn State. Once again, if you look up his stats, we'll kind of bring him up just now to show him. It's not too crazy. You look in 2023, he only had 3 sacks, and you look at the most he had in his season was 5. Got a lot left to be desired. And also, you look at the Pro Football ratings, average at best, not crazy for his rankings. Towards the end, his final three games got a lot better, especially against Rutgers in 95.5. But overall, once again, I think this is a project. It's going to take maybe a year or two, maybe 3 years potentially with this one. But I think overall, the ability that he brings can definitely pay off. 6'3", 250, a little bit undersized, but again, I think with the athletic ability, it could definitely pay off if a situation where he can go and develop in a right spot. And I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could be a good destination for this one. So finally, with rounding off the first round for the Arizona Cardinals. So for this one, looking at what we have left, we have wide receiver available. We still have plenty of other picks left. A lot of good players left on the board. What will the Arizona Cardinals do with their third selection? I do have them going offense in this spot, but not wide receiver or anything. I think once again building the offensive line for Kyler Murray is key. And I have Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma. I think you have to once again protect Kyler Murray, undersized quarterback. Maybe it's not the best for skill set wise for wide receiver position, but again, it's a deep draft class for the position. I think you can go in day 2 and get a solid wide receiver available in day 2 to help Kyler Murray out. But I think most importantly is to protect Kyler Murray best as possible. Another quarterback has a decent list of history, or excuse me, I can't speak. A decent list of an injury history. Has been constantly banged up quite a few times, and maybe decent wasn't the best word to use, but second half of the seasons have been pretty bad for him. He's slowed down. He's kind of worn out, and he's gotten hurt. And I think for this one, offensive line is the biggest thing for him to protect him and to keep him healthy. He's just getting back from a season-ending injury back in 2022. Just got back in late this past season in 2023. You want to keep him on the field for a whole season. I think this is a great selection there to build the offensive line for the Arizona Cardinals. So next, I have the Buffalo Bills staying at 28 for this one. Where do they go? Definitely a lot of places to go in this spot. Some people more and more speculate defense could be a position, but I'm gonna stick with wide receiver for this one. I have Ladd McConkey from Georgia going to the Buffalo Bills. It's been a big. It's been pretty tough this offseason. A lot of big names have gone, mostly on the defense side of the ball, but the shocking one was Stephon Diggs. It kind of caught, definitely, no doubt, caught me off by surprise a couple weeks ago. It's definitely it's gonna be interesting. Solely at the wide receiver position, you have Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel as your top 2 wide receivers. I like Shakir. I think he'll have a great year this year. Not the biggest fan of Curtis Samuel, but definitely is a good option at the wide receiver position. But it's still left a lot to be desired. Even with Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox there, I think you have to get someone to really step up and play. McConkey, his stats aren't going to pop out at you for receiving wise. This past year only had 480 receiving yards, but when he had to, he made big plays when he needed. And also you look at, especially too, with the snap count, not the best. But so many people want to kind of put him as a slot receiver, but you look at a vast majority of his snaps this past season were on the wide. Of 150 snaps, 118 of those were on the outside. And you look at only had 2 drops, had 9 missed tackles forced. Mostly definitely his best to be utilized in the shorter to intermediate game. But I think the biggest thing too is kind of looking at similar ways about Chop Robinson is just the potential in him. Stat-wise, once again, isn't going to jump out at you, but when you watch him, especially the route running, he's phenomenal at route running, and I think in a situation in Buffalo, he can no doubt thrive with Josh Allen and the other pieces that they have around him. I think this would be a great spot for Ladd McConkey for the Buffalo Bills. So for the next pick for the Detroit Lions, let's see what I have here. I have cornerback Nate Wiggins going there to the Detroit Lions to help that secondary up a little bit more. It was a tough season for the Detroit Lions last year. Not saying they had, it was a horrible season, but just falling that short of going to their first ever Super Bowl, had a bad second half. It sucks. It was tough to see. I was really hoping they were going to make it to the Super Bowl and get their opportunity. Unfortunately, they fell short at the end, losing to the San Francisco 49ers. I think with Dan Campbell in what he wants, aggressiveness, I think Nate Wiggins is a great choice for that secondary and the defense regardless. Offense, I think they have more than enough pieces to once again go back there and contend in the NFC. Defense to me is the way to go with this one, Nate Wiggins from Clemson. Next with Baltimore Ravens, we're going to stick with the cornerback position with Kool-Aid McKinstry. For this one, building defense up, lost a couple pieces this past offseason. But I mean, a spot could no doubt be wide receiver once again to double down and get a wide receiver for Lamar Jackson. But for this one, I'm going to go with maybe not the best choice for Lamar Jackson's interest, but I'm going to go with Kool-Aid McKinstry in this one. And again, just to reinsure that defensive side and help that secondary out. So we have the San Francisco 49ers next. I think the biggest priority is the offensive line. I'm going to go with Jordan Morgan from Arizona with this one to help Brock Purdy out in the long-term future. Some of the pieces on that offensive line, especially Trent Williams, is getting up there in age. I think you have to look at eventually moving, find replacements and moving off those guys sooner rather than later. And I think this one no doubt fills that void, especially like I said for Williams on that tackle position, getting someone like Jordan Morgan that can develop, or if you want to put him on that side of the offensive line, or wherever it may be, getting the future option at that spot. So the Super Bowl champions, back-to-back Super Bowl champions in the Kansas City Chiefs. For this one, it's a throwaway pick in my opinion. They can go in any direction they want, and they'll probably succeed, and they'll probably make it back to the Super Bowl for a third straight year. It's just that's how I feel like the Kansas City Chiefs are. They can do no wrong in this pick, and no doubt wide receiver is a big one. I'm gonna go with a big body wide receiver in Xavier Legette. The biggest concern, no doubt, is just his age. 23 years old, will be 24 at some point in the season. So then and you have another Calvin Ridley type of wide receiver age-wise, but has no doubt all the tools to succeed. A little bit of a late bloomer, had his best season in his final year at South Carolina. But once again, for Patrick Mahomes, he can make anything work, and his skill set being a physical, looks very similar to AJ Brown. Not saying he's going to be, but it looks similar to AJ Brown, a very physical wide receiver, and how he plays, very tough to get down to the ground. 6'3", 227, a nice wide receiver to pair up to Patrick Mahomes. So that's going to do it. That's going to wrap up Mock Draft 1.0 for the 2024 NFL Draft. And once again, we're just going to give you a quick overview of the draft board for all the 32 teams. And that's what it is. Let me know your thoughts down below on my selections. Do you agree with some of them? Do you think certain players show them lower than expected, higher than maybe a little too high than I have them? Should be players I have a little too low. Let me know your thoughts down below on my mock trade or mock draft 1.0 if you agree with it or not. But without further ado, I'll see you in the next one, in the next mock draft in a few days.